what I'll do first is very much just jump into, and hopefully you can see my screen. I don't want to kill anyone with PowerPoint to start with. Start with
your screen.
Excellent, perfect. And I want to show you what it is, where you get it, and then we'll go into a little bit of detail about the use cases and a bit more of a deeper dive into how it all works and what it enables. So the name is probably the most confusing thing about this. And the fact it even has the word NetApp in there really confuses people.
Okay. Really? And manage.
And the reason for that is that they start to think it's something from NetApp, and it's not. It's actually Microsoft's own file service. So we are the technology provider that helped Microsoft build this enterprise class NFS and SMB offering, but it's sold and supported by Microsoft directly. So it's not a marketplace offering. It's directly in the portal for you to consume. And that means that you can treat it exactly the same as everything else, whether it's your AKS fleet, whether it's a premium disk, a standard disk, or even Azure files. It's managed in the same way. So that means that you can use the portal, you can use PowerShell, command line interface. It's in the native AZ module itself, so the AZ module. And then it's also manageable upstream of that with the usual sort of tools that you might use with Azure today. So things like Terraform and Ansible. It's already in the providers for those as well. So we see a lot of orchestration, a lot of automation around this, because at the end of the day, you know, the infrastructure here is pretty much driven as code in a lot of organizations now as well. So it's important to note that even though it's got the word NetApp in there, you're not expected to know anything about NetApp. You don't need to have any NetApp on-prem. It's actually just enterprise SMB NFS services from Microsoft directly themselves. It's got nothing to do with NetApp from that perspective. And I think Phil and everyone else will agree with me here when I say that's probably the most confusing part around it. So with that in mind, let's get started with a scenario that's very popular right now, which is going to be Windows Virtual Desktop, for example. A lot of organizations I've been working with looking at how to enable remote workforce, how to do that securely, how to, you know, probably I'd be amazed if companies' DR plans didn't include remote working from this point onwards if they didn't already. And, you know, I think that when we're looking at things like FS Logics and Windows Virtual Desktop, for example, then you want to start looking at, well, what are my options for those user profiles? And there's a variety of options. No one, and depending on your circumstances, there will be one that will be more preferable to yourselves. So with ANF here, if we wanted to go provision some storage for example, FS Logics, the very first thing I go and do is create what's called an Azure NetApp account. Okay. And to do that, it's very much like your storage account almost. So if you have a look at your storage accounts, everyone here will have storage accounts because this is what your virtual machines reside on, or your Azure files, or whatever it is. They're all your storage accounts there. So it's no different from that perspective. In ANF, you create your storage accounts, and these storage accounts reside in specific areas. So you'll see this is a tier 1, ring 1 Microsoft service, which basically means that in all of the flagship data centers around the world, or flagship regions around the world, that it's available there. The only major exception I can see to that are either the German ones, or at the minute is going to be Hong Kong. So, of course, what I will do without breaking any NDAs is obviously this is a very actively developed product, and you know, there's big intentions and plans to have that list almost double the length in a very short time frame. So keep checking back on the regions if one of the ones that you want there isn't. For everyone on this call, I'm going to make a wide assumption that it's probably going to be either the UK or North or West Europe that are going to be your primary regions right now anyway. So, of course, we're in all 4 of those. And then once you've gone and set up your subscription itself, then comes the actual storagey bit. You'll notice here that the things you can do are, you can see it's all native. So everything I've ever done on here is in the activity log. So you can see it's loading my information for things I've done in the last 6 hours. If I wanted to see, you know, who's been doing what over the last month, very easy to go and see all the management operations that have been happening. And this is cool because it doesn't show just the the things that I'm doing in the portal. This is all my service accounts and any other sort of staff members that we have. So you can see my colleague here, Sebastian, has been busy doing some snapshots and stuff like that as well. So pretty cool. And over here, you can see all the AKS stuff that was running to go and create volumes and things like that as well. It's fully secured from IAM as well. So when you're looking at your Azure resource, it's very important to make sure that you're using Azure AD. So Azure AD for your management operations. So if you want to start having service principals that are then able to go and create volumes, take snapshots, do backups, do things like replication and things like that, then all of it is IAM supported. Again, no change from anything really in Azure at all, because it's all delivered through the Azure resource provider itself. So there's no sort of gotcha here, no having to learn a totally way of managing things. And if you are from the world of NetApp, if you've used NetApp before, and I always say this, and Carl always laughs his head off at this, is I've got 15 and a half years of NetApp experience. And it's all been reduced to a form that you fill in that just basically says how much capacity do you need and how fast you want to go. And that's it. That's all you ever really needed to be a good storage admin, was an understanding of how much space do you need and how fast you need to go. And that is all you fill in the form that I'm going to show you in just a minute. But to be able to do that in the old world, you had to understand things like storage area networks, WWPNs, Allure, load balancing, and all sorts of different things. And you don't need to know any of that. And that's the cool thing about this. You got your supports for your tagging. So obviously, if you're using Terraform or if you're doing chargeback, showback, any stuff like that, then you're going to heavily be relying on your tagging there. And of course, if it's mission critical, I certainly recommend you stick a lock on it so that somebody doesn't accidentally delete your data. From a perspective of actually seeing how you can actually go and orchestrate this, maybe using ARM templates, well, it goes and generates the ARM template for you directly. So you can just export the template directly. You can see it's here, and there's my template done. So there's my my resources that I've got in there, and these are all the parameters I've passed through to it as well. So nice and easy to go and get those resources. What we really like here as well is the fact that this supports Active Directory. So your normal on-prem Active Directory, you can plug it directly down in ExpressRoute or a site-to-site VPN, plug it to your DNS that's on-premise, and it will automatically become a computer object in your existing Active Directory, which means that your migrations to Azure are very quick, because we can migrate everything without you having to re-architect or change permissions or change folder structure or anything. Using this, Microsoft users can use some very, very fast technology we've got, like XCP, totally free of charge, or even Cloud Sync, totally free of charge. And it will move your data and your file servers, whether it's SMB or NFS, directly into Azure at breakneck speeds with all of your permissions intact. So that allows you to not have to re-architect or anything. You can move into Azure, and then once you're in Azure, you can then improve on that architecture. So from that point, then once your data's there, that's when you start looking at things like, well, how do we do the more modern architectures around cloud, where you can make even more significant cost savings? Or really, the key word in cloud is utilization. It's no different to really what we did on-prem years ago, where when VMware came and changed the world, and rather than having 15% utilization on servers, we started getting 95, 96%, because we could have multiple servers on these expensive bits of tin. In the cloud here as well, you're paying by hour, you're scaling up and scaling down, and that's always been really easy to do from a compute perspective, but never from a storage perspective. If anybody's tried to take a disk out of a RAID set and has had a happy experience, please let me know. I'm pretty sure you'll never have a happy experience. So that means that even with, a storage space direct or, any of those sort of boxes, when you add disks to them, sizing up is fine, but sizing down is a little bit more difficult. Same with CVO and other products that use managed disk on there. And that's fine, because that's the way that RAID works. But on ANF, one of the benefits Microsoft offer with this is the ability to not only scale up, but you can scale down as well. So if you're looking at the case of Windows Virtual Desktop, where, for example, between 8:30 and 10 o'clock is your busiest time because you're going to have your login storms at that particular point. And I'm not saying boot storms, because we don't see boot storms at all, because they're not. You can't have OS disks running off ANF anyway. But for your login storms, which is your profiles and those do occur. What you're going to be able to do is give yourself a way to meet that demand, or even surpass the demand that you need in real time. And then after those storms, you can then shrink down the performance and the units of performance and make your cost savings there every single hour as well. So to go and provision some storage, what we've got here is we can look at, for example, the capacity pools. And let's go and say basically what a capacity pool is, and I think it's the worst name in the world. I think it should be called a storage pool. It is effectively you saying, Microsoft, I would like to reserve some space and performance. And that's why I think the name capacity pool is a bit misleading. So if we want to do FS Logics, I'd give it a name that makes sense to me, and then I pick my service level. And these service levels are different prices and different amounts of throughput or IOPS per provision terabyte that I do. So standard, for example, 16 megabytes per second, which is 1,000 IOPS. Premium is 4,000 IOPS, which is 64 megabytes a second, and Ultra is 128, which is 8,000 IOPS. So you can pick which one suits you best. And the best thing about this as well, in terms of pricing, is that Ultra is not double the price of Premium. So, for example, if you wanted to go and hit something like 640 megabytes a second of throughput, then 5 terabytes of Ultra would do it nice and easily, as opposed to 10 terabytes of Premium. And again, I'll show you this in more detail on a slide that I've got, but I didn't want to start with slides. So with that, we can go and provision that, and that will basically create us a capacity pool. And it seems like so easy, right? But I really want to put this in perspective. When I was doing this on-prem, so I used to be the storage admin for a large bank in the northwest of England, and to do just that used to take me 3 months, because what I've actually done there is I've done the equivalent of going to a vendor, getting their latest kit, getting a quote, speccing out exactly the amount of space and performance I needed, ordering it, putting it through cab request, ordering it, then waiting for the delivery, then rack stacking it, and then configuring it to the point where I'm able to have NFS and SMB services on my box. I've just done it all in 30 seconds. And that's what's brilliant about this service, is that obviously you're billed by the hour for it as well. So it's fantastic, because it means that you can go stand up MVPs very quickly, but also because you bill by hour, it also lends itself to the on-demand capacity modeling of Azure very well as well. Now, once you've asked and reserved your space and performance from Microsoft, you then go and carve out your volumes, and your volumes are the endpoints that your compute, your servers, your AKS containers, everything else will go and see. And they can mount these over NFS version 3, 4.1, or SMB 3, and it will also downscale to NFS SMB 2 if you've got any sort of more legacy stuff that needs that. And all of that's entirely supported here. And we'll just run through a quick example of doing both, actually, because I think it would be nice to show both. So let's go and do a very quick NFS mount, for example. So West Midlands user group, and this is going to be NFS. So we take it out of the pool that we had, and it's showing that of that pool, so we asked for 4 terabytes, we've got 1.95 left. Let's go and create a volume. So this volume is going to just be a small volume. Doesn't matter if I make it the same size or if it takes the same amount of time to go and create it. From a networking perspective as well, and this is really cool and really important to understand, ANF is private. There's no public IP address on it. You can't even accidentally configure it to have a public IP address. And companies love this because it inherently is secure, because it's on the inside of your NSGs. So it's in your VNet, inside of your NSGs, inside of your Palo Alto firewalls, or whatever you may be using. It's the same as like if you were doing it on premise. You have your firewalls at the perimeter, and then you have your trusted network Inside that trusted network is where you went and deployed your SAN or NAS systems, and then you put them as close as you could to the compute. And that's exactly what's happening here. This resides in the Azure data centers itself, under Microsoft's lock and key, the same subject and regulatory and compliance that all normal Azure disk goes under. So everything from, the support is provided by Microsoft, to even the fact that if a disk fails, it's turned into stardust before it even leaves the data center. It's shredded into dust particles, basically. So from that standpoint, you can see there's no difference at all. It's just business as usual from the Azure standpoint. From the virtual networking standpoint, because it's private IP, it uses a feature of Azure called, you get a delegated subnet, and then it uses private VNet injection. And VNet injection means that it's going to consume a private IP address from within your virtual network. And that fully supports both hub and spoke models, as well as you can see here, I've also got my AKS VNet, so I can go and provision directly into that if I wanted to as well. And just for the purpose of this, I'm going to go straight into my hub. You'll see the subnet there. If you don't have one, you'll have to create one. You will delegate an entire subnet to VNet, and I say an entire subnet. We only need something like 12 IP addresses. It's not massive, so no blockers there at all. And that 12 IP addresses, by the way, can host hundreds of volumes. It's not one volume to one IP address. You can have one IP address that could have hundreds of volumes off it. The load balancing of these IP addresses and everything is done by the service automatically. So you don't even have to worry about that. It does that automatically for you. Every time you request a volume, you'll see that it's automatically looking at the entire fleet of these all-flash platform, and it's basically picking the best or most underutilized place. So you're always getting the best, most performant space in the fleet every single time you go and pick a new volume. So we said we're doing NFS. I can do 4.1 or 3. In the interest of time, I'll just do 3, leave it as normal. And something else that you also get here is the ability to do an export policy. So an export policy allows you to lock it to a list of either one or several clients via their IP address. And then you can also lock it via read or write, read or no access as well. So a great additional piece of security that's built into it. Of course, you've got your normal tags. So obviously highly recommend those. Don't skip them like I did. And then just go and hit create. And again, that is as difficult as it gets. I think the most difficult question on there was, do you want NFS or do you want SMB? So nice and easy. So we'll leave that one going, and let's go and create an SMB file share. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to replace the need for having any Windows file servers in your environment at all. If it loads. There we go. Cool. So what I've done beforehand is I have plugged it into an existing Active Directory that we have. You can just remember it can support this sort of Active Directory, which is a normal AD. It can also support Azure Active Directory via domain services, so that's easy to do. And what we're going to do is just create an SMB volume. So how can I remove the need for ever having to maintain a Windows file server to patch it, go through the patch cycles with that? So again, West Midlands user group, and we'll do SMB. And here we're going to do, again, just another volume. We're going to take it into our hub as well. So we'll put it in there. It's going to get its own IP address. And this time we're going to hit SMB. So some people will know SMB as CIFS. CIFS is SMB 1.0. Obviously, it's the file protocol, Windows file protocol, created for sharing files in Windows. The Active Directory, so you can see I've given it a service principal or an account that can add that volume, which will be a file server directly into the Active Directory. And then I give it a share name as well. I leave the tags, and then I just go and hit create. And with that, I've created enterprise class storage for my Unix estate or Linux estate. And also I've been able to show you very quickly how you can go and create it for your Windows estate as well. Now, there are some really cool upcoming features around this that obviously are under NDA, but it'd be great. So in a future session to show you some of the cool things that are happening around, things that, without giving anything NDA around, things that NetApp does already outside of ANF. So things like mixed protocol volumes that have both NFS and SMB on-prem. Wouldn't it be great if stuff like that made its way to this sort of platform? So keep your eyes peeled for this, because there's a lot happening over the next 2 or 3 months in terms of features for this that will make your life a lot easier for if you do have mixed environments, if you've got DR requirements and other bits and pieces as well. And talking about DR and protection and things like that, inbuilt to ANF, one of the cool features that we have for things like FS Logics or anything that you host on here is the ability to also take on-demand instant snapshots. And a lot of people say, well, a snapshot's a snapshot, not bothered about that. And I'm certainly not saying snapshots will replace your backup. I don't even want to get into that argument. Snapshots are your get out of jail card for if something goes wrong on your production systems. There is no faster restore that you can do than a snapshot on the primary system itself. So with ANF, those snapshots are stored within the primary system on that volume, so within that volume, which means if you replicate that volume to a second region, and you can see that the private preview for cross-region replication is active right now in the US. It's coming to EMEA very soon, so just speak to your local CSA to see if you can get signed up. What that will do is, if you imagine with snapshots, I always describe them like this. I say, there is no business on the planet, I don't know of a single business on the planet that would want to restore to, a week ago. Absolutely no way that somebody would want to restore their business to a week ago. You want to restore to maybe a few minutes ago, at best a few hours ago, whatever, that, and even then you're probably going to struggle. So a lot of businesses will try and get as close as they can to the problem issue. So what we want to do there is say, well, this is what this is for. It's for ensuring that you can restore as fast as possible your active file systems, most mission critical systems that you've got as fast as possible. And you can do that via this. So you can then take your snapshot on demand. So you can see here volume. So if we go to our SMB volume here, then you can see here, I can just do a snapshot. And I can hit add snapshot and take a snapshot, and that will be instant as well. So here, for example, let's just say this is going to be our 1900 snapshot. Hit OK. And that there, regardless if I've got 60 terabytes, 70 terabytes, or 7 megabytes in there, that is instant. There's no difference in the amount of time it takes to create that snapshot. In fact, this little blue bar moving is actually just the Azure resource pack waiting for the polling to come back. From a storage perspective at the back end, the snapshot is completed instantly. So then I can use that to restore, and I can restore in place. So if this is my SQL database or my Oracle database or my SAP or SAP HANA database, I can restore my system instantly back to that last known point. If, for example, I didn't want to, and I wanted to restore to a new volume, then I could do restore to new volume. And I've been working with a lot of customers that we found that they were doing things like they'd have a staging area where lots of files were coming in from SFTP and batch systems and everything else, and then they'd copy it to another area so that they'd have parallel work streams. And we actually just tried a POC last week with a major European clothes retailer, where they were using Robocopy to move data between 2 volumes. And we just thought, well, if it's just copying data from one to the next, what if we just instantly create a snapshot and then we restore to the second volume, and that the second systems use that second volume? So we went from, it was 183 seconds copy time to we managed to reduce it to 16 do it using the copy function. But the added thing was that they could do this on demand. So every time a job fired, the job took a snapshot, created the restore, mounted it, and then when the job had finished, they deleted it because they no longer needed to keep this empty thing that they were trying to synchronize or anything, which actually meant that they were able to make quite significant cost savings because they weren't using it all the time. So it was only there for the time period they needed that job to complete, and then it went away. So the next time the job ran, it went and said, right, I need a snapshot, go and give me a restored volume, mount that volume, run all the jobs against it, and do that. And the best thing about this was that they weren't then sharing that one volume between just one work stream. They were able to add a third work stream that they wanted for UAT that was very difficult for them to do. They were doing that as well, so they can actually expand on because they've removed the waiting time for copy operations and also all the overhead that goes along with that. So with that in mind as well, what I want to show you is the flexibility of this. So let's go to EU West and volumes. And we're going to use, let's see, where's my virtual machine? Use Ubuntu. Okay, so we've got Ubuntu box over here, nothing special. It's just a normal D4, nothing too crazy there. And I'm just going to connect to it here. So give me a second. Okay, SSH, Kirk at. Okay. And I'll share my full screen in just a second so you can see everything. Okay. Okay, let's share the whole screen. I always get scared when I've got to share my whole screen because I never know what's going to happen. Okay, so hopefully you can see this bit over here. I'll just make it a little bit bigger so we can all see it properly. Okay. Cool. So I've just logged into that Ubuntu box there. And you may be thinking, okay, you've shown me how to create storage and stuff. Well, how do I actually go and use it? And then is it really as fast as you say it is? So this is sub-millisecond latency storage that can scale up to about 4.7 gigabytes a second on a single virtual machine. It breaks the current thinking around you get so many IOPS per VM. So we can give a D2 V2 box the same read IOPS as a D64 box. So if you're storage bound, then ANF could be a very good thing for you for highly transactional IO on smaller virtual machine sizes. And obviously you're going to get cost savings because some software vendors, of course, you're not just going to have a VM, you're going to have some software on there, will license on the amount of cores and amount of RAM that you have. So if it was the fact that you were growing your virtual machines because you needed more storage throughput on attached managed disk, well, ANF allows you to say, well, actually, we can give a standard virtual machine, quite easily, sort of 300,000 IOPS off the back of this. So it's really interesting to see how you can do that. Now, where the scale does matter, so that you can't. I'm certainly not saying you can run everything on a D2 V2 because that'd be great, but you can't because what Azure do is with the virtual machine sizes. Is that as you go up the sizes, the amount of cores and the amount of RAM, and I'm not sure of the exact algorithm that they use at the back end, but it's documented pretty well, will dictate what the egress is on those bots, the maximum bandwidth for egress. And that's really important because the maximum bandwidth for egress is directly correlated to that's your write throughput. So you need to look at how many megabytes a second of throughput each VM can do, and it's documented very well. If you just type in Azure VM's bandwidth, the tables will come up for both Windows and Linux. And it will say something like a D4 is, I think it's 8,000 or 6,000 megabits per second or something like that. So then what you can do with that is then you can have a look at that and work out off your IOPS size. So if you're using 4K, 8K, 16K, 32K, what that would mean in terms of your IOPS. So let's go and mount this and let's just show you how easy this is to do. So with ANF, we're going to go over here, get that volume that we want. So let's go and let's go get our NFS volume over here. So wmerg NFS. And if I didn't know how to do this already, I can go to mount instructions and it gives me all the mount instructions there. So I'm just going to do this. Okay. So what we'll do, follow these instructions. We're going to run this and create a folder. So you can see that folder there is WMUG NFS. And I'm going to go mount my file system on there. And we're mounted. That's it. So one little trick that I need to do is just give myself some rights on there, and everyone's going to go crazy because I'm using Tribod 777, but it's a demo, so I don't care. So WMUG NF, was it? FS. Okay. So if I do a DF command, you can see it's mounted. There it is. My file system's entirely mounted, ready to use. That was it. That was as hard as it gets. So if I go into it, so let's go into WMUG. There we go. And let's try and run some FIO. So let's go and see what that looks like. Okay, so we're running on a 100 gig volume of premium. So that's going to give us 6.4 megabytes a second of throughput. It's not much. So let's go and say, okay, we want more throughput than that, please. That's pretty boring. Let's go get interesting. So let's go and make this pool bigger as well. Let's say we need more performance. So your performance is done per terabyte. So don't worry about your capacity. This is why I think this should be called storage pools, not capacity pools, because you're actually getting up to 15 terabytes of space, and it should also say up to, and then your service level there. So from a volume perspective, you'll notice that we're at a very small volume size here. So let's go and get something like a little bit more respectable. Let's go and size this as just one terabyte for now. Okay. So 1 terabyte will give us exactly 64 megabytes a second of throughput. So we'll just update that. You'll notice I haven't done anything at all on the host. And I've just sped it up a little bit. So it's going to start writing out my IO files and stuff, which is nice. So you can see here, it's laying out my IO files. There's 4 of them in this job, I believe. Again, just remembering we're going pretty slow here anyway, because again, I'm only done 64 megabytes a second of throughput, which is going to be 4,000 IOPS. Okay, so it's laying it all out. We've got to wait for one more, and then it will show us the results. Okay, and now it should start the job. Anytime now. Just while we're waiting for that as well. Oh, there you go. So that you can see you've asked for 64 megabytes a second, you get 65. So you get 1 extra for free. Then let's say Windows Virtual Desktop, we're now dealing with a boot storm, a login storm. So maybe between 2 hours of the day, we're going to have a 10-fold increase in what we really need. And in the old world of storage, you would have built your storage to cope with your peak and it stays static. So you're going to be underutilized. You'd never, ever do that with compute because you're being billed per hour. So you'd want to be able to shrink to make you cost savings. So we want to get up to around 640 megabytes a second. What we're going to do, resize, add a 0 on the end, hit OK. Okay, that's been updated, and there we go. My performance on the fly. I don't have to do any reconfiguration. This doesn't matter if it's Unix, Linux, Windows. It's all done on the fly. So here you can see I'm chugging along here at 10.5K IOPS, and I can push that higher if I want to. So I will start getting to certain limits of the box when I start pushing it even higher, but let's try and use 12 terabytes, for example, give ourselves about an extra 128. And again, updated, and you can see now I'm at 13.5K IOPS. And what my only advice would really be is just be careful with IOPS. IOPS by itself doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of like saying, you know, I broke the land speed record because I did 300. But you haven't said what it is. Is it 300 miles per hour or 300 kilometers an hour, or is it 300, some other unit of distance? So an IOP by itself is pretty useless. You need to know what the block size is. And then that's going to tell you, how what your throughput is as well. And there's a relation between your throughput and your read here. So you'll see that in this test that I've been doing, there's a great documentation that I'm putting out next week, that I'm using 64K blocks here. Okay, so when you tend to do your IOPS here, and you'll see here, if you want to do a like-for-like comparison with what Azure use for IOPS, Azure use an 8K block size. So if I go to an 8K block size to see how many IOPS for a like-for-like comparison this is able to drive, I can hit enter here. And now I'm using 8K. You'll see that my box is actually capable of 46.5 thousand IOPS. That's a like-for-like comparison with the tables that you see on docs.microsoft.com. So a great way of knowing then that, okay, if I want to do a comparison here, now all of this is documented very well. You'll notice none of it's on the NetApp sites. Again, this is Microsoft's own NFS SMB service. And you can see here, they give you some performance benchmarks, how to use VDBench, how to go and test it, what the results are, and even the config files and everything there as well. So you can see all the recommendations about that just off docs.microsoft.com. You can also see some of the solutions architectures as well. So for example, I've shown you just a storage layer where we've had great success, or customers have had great success with this. Like the Repsols of the world and BPs of the world, where we've been doing heavy amount of HPC. So I worked with Juan from Spain, who is based in Madrid. He's the main guy from Repsol. And we were able to basically outperform by a magnitude of 5 times faster than their on-premise system for HPC. So it's certainly something that, we've documented very well for reservoir simulation if you're into that sort of thing. If you're looking at MPI batch workloads and stuff, we've got all that documented. If you're building sort of modern architecture for modern business today, then you're probably going to be doing it with containers at some point. It's fully supported with AKS as well, so you can have dynamics storage provisioning with AKS. Very simple, documented very well here. You can also have Oracle and then SAP, everything from SAP HANA, scale out, or fully supported here as well. So one of the cool things as well, two last things I'll leave you with. NetApp was obviously known as a storage player, but really NetApp is actually it's a data solutions provider, and we've helped Microsoft build the fastest shared file storage platform on the planet. It beats anything that AWS can offer. It beats anything that GCP can offer. So that means that it's a great place for shared file workloads. On top of that, ANF customers also benefit from free of charge remote caching capabilities as well. So NetApp went and acquired a company called Talon, which you can see here, Talon Fast. It's now referred to as Global File Cache. So what that means is if you're scared, or a bit, not scared, wrong word, if you're a bit concerned about moving all your Windows file servers into Azure, that you're going to lose your performance because you're basically making the wire between that person's desktop and the data that they need longer. And everyone here knows that the longer the wire, the longer the latency. The longer the latency, the less responsive it is for me opening those apps. And that might be massive deal breaker for me if I'm doing things like engineering or AutoCAD or Revit or any of those sort of workloads. Then do not fear, because free of charge, you're entitled to use GFC, Global File Caching. So what that does is you put a virtual machine into your remote offices. It caches all of the locally used files so that they're very responsive. And on top of that, it also makes sure that you can't have any conflicts as well, because it employs global file locking for you. And all of that is provided free of charge if you're using ANF. So that's a fantastic deal for anyone using ANF. Second to that is if you've got any departmental shared data, so if you're just putting files, customer data, letters, that sort of stuff that is on SMB as well in ANF, you also get free entitlement to cloud compliance. So that is a system that's worth an hour in itself to go through, but I'll try and do it some justice in about 30 seconds, where basically you'll be able to have a full GDPR report of everything that's in there. Does it fall under GDPR? Does it fall under PCI? Does it have sensitive personal information in there? Can you tell me what information I hold on Carl, for example, and give me a report that I can then send to him to say this is all the information we hold on you? You get that free of charge if you're using ANF. And the other thing as well to bear in mind is not only is it a great endpoint for the storage, but in terms of getting there, we've made it simpler than ever to get there with Cloud Sync, and also with XCP, which you're entitled to, again, free of charge, no additional cost, to go and do that and use with Azure NetApp files as well. So hopefully that's give you a glimpse into what we've been helping Microsoft build and help them bring out to Azure consumers, so that they can more easily than ever move some of those typically difficult scenarios and workloads that have been stuck on-prem for a long time into Azure, but also the fact that it's also the other way, where we're bringing now high performance and statefulness to modern architectures around, for example, Azure Kubernetes service as well. So I'd like to just thank you all for your time, and I'm back. And if there's any questions, please pop them in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer. So thanks everyone, and thanks very much.
Cheers, Kirk. I think Carl's been trying to answer some of the questions as we go along. There might be a couple of still in. I know Darren's just asked one around, can snapshots be scheduled? And there was a previous one around NSGs.
Okay, cool. I can answer those if that's all right, Phil.
Yeah, sure. Let's go, and then we'll jump to the break. Thanks.
Sure. Kirk. Awesome. So does the ANF delegated subnet support NSG? Great question. With that, no, the delegated subnet does not support NSG. So the VNet it's in can support NSG, and we've documented that. And there was some confusion with the documentation, because obviously we understand everyone's using NSG. It's not ANF that doesn't support NSG. It's a VNet injected service that doesn't support NSG. And there are some action items around how we can enable that in future. It's Azure networking at the end of the day. So when you're using NSGs, there's one rule that you'll have on the VNet that says anything on, say my ANF VNet is 10.0.0/20, whatever it is. Then basically my rule will say that anything that goes on that path will just go out to the VNet, and the VNet routing will push it straight through to ANF, because otherwise you'll have no return path. So we've documented this pretty well. You should see it on the docs now, if not next week. But yeah, it can fully support you using things like Palo Alto networks and things like that. There's no problem there. The second question I saw was, so we had delegated subnets. What was the other one? NSGs, GFCs.
We just replayed the one around subscription types. So someone's asked a question about the minimum type of subscription that's supported to utilize ANF. So is it enterprise subscriptions only, or partner-based CSP? I think that it looks like somebody's saying that from an MSDN perspective, it's not available.
So let me I've had ANF enabled on my own personal account, which was MSDN. So that we don't stipulate a subscription type as far as I'm aware. Basically, it's enabled on a subscription ID. So as long as you've got a subscription ID, you can put it in and have it enabled on there. There's no technical requirement for us to have a specific sub. I mean, I've been demoing for the last 18 months on my own personal subscription, which has the free $200 offer on it, and that's it. And then I've got an MSDN pack that sits on the top that gives me $200 a month. So there's no.
Looks like Stuart's tried it.
Yeah, is it because we need to be whitelisted? Is that the case, Kirk? Is that?
Yeah, so it's very important to note. Yeah, so currently there exists a process where if you just try this off the bat, you'll get an error saying that a resource couldn't be registered. Okay, you have to ask Microsoft to enable this on your subscription, and that will typically take about 24 hours. So yeah, if you try and run this right now, and I can see a few comments there, some people trying it now, you'll absolutely get an error. You need to activate it on your subscription. So there's no, you're not committing yourself to any spend or anything like that. You can just say activate it on the subscription. If you need it faster than ever, then just ping myself and Carl, and we can help get that faster. But it's typically only 24 hours anyway. And the product group at Microsoft whitelist every single day off that. Once you've been whitelisted, you'll receive an email from the team saying you've been whitelisted. And that final command that you try to run that fails, where it says it can't register the provider, I think is the error. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Basically, yeah, it will register the provider there. It's no different to, like when you first start with a subscription and you want more than 32 cores, you have to ask and request it. Or you want to use larger instances, you have to ask and request it. This is like protected from that perspective. It is envisaged, however, that it will go away in future. So yeah, it's something that is a minor pain right now. If you want to just go, this looks exciting, I want to start right a second right now. Well, we just have to say, well, it's going to take us up to 24 hours to switch it on for you. But that, once you've done that, it's enabled on that subscription. Great question, thank you.
Right. Chavez.
Last one was snapshots. Okay, cool. So yes, great questions. 2 questions there. First one was, can you automate the snapshots? Yeah, absolutely. I wrote the automation tool that's in use at most of the customers today. So if you just type in Kirk Ryan ANF scheduler or GitHub ANF scheduler, it will pop up. I'm sure I'll ping a link out if there's an email that goes out after this with it on. And that is based on a Logic app in Azure. It deploys. I've had mine running for 43,000 runs right now, and I still haven't spent a penny because WebLogic apps are absolutely awesome at doing scheduled tasks like that. So yeah, you can automate it, and it's all documented and stuff very easily. Is it coming native to it? Yep. It will be on the Blade very soon. So, you've probably seen some videos with it on already, if you haven't already. So it's already in the public domain. But yeah, it's coming in future. And the second part of that was, is there any plan to integrate it with Azure Backup? So not necessarily Azure Backup. It will gain its own backup capabilities, where it will back up your snapshots to Azure Blob automatically for you. Me and Carl will be able to demo it at the next user group around sort of the June, July timeframe. But if you want to see it sooner, and we are showing it tomorrow live on one of our webcasts. So if you just search for NetApp Insight, and again, I don't want to really do a NetApp pitch here, by the way, but if it is just off the back of this question, because you mentioned it, if you want to see it live, I'm demoing it live tomorrow. The cloud backup service. It's only a 3-minute glimpse, and it'll be at 11 o'clock tomorrow UK time. If you just search for Insight Digital, you'll see it there. Great questions. And Dave Lusty, will this fix it? Yeah, so that's the provider. Yeah, Microsoft.NetApp, that's right.
Yeah, so you can just register that under your subscription and go to resource providers, find NetApp, click on it, register, and you're done.
That's it. That's it. And if you've not got it whitelisted, though, it might throw an error and just say you can't enable it just yet.
Cool. That was my question as to whether it would actually fix it or if it just looked like it would.
Yeah, yeah. It's annoyingly you're at the front door of the house you always wanted to get in, but then your key snaps sort of thing. So yeah, you just need to click the register button now. And yeah, that's right. Logic apps are not free. That's right. You pay per revision, but it's like I think per run it's 0.00. And forgive me if I get this wrong. There was 6 noughts, and then it's a 4 pence per run. So it's not something that you leave on and you're paying like $5 an hour or anything. Like I said, I've been running mine for 18 months on my demo environment, and I still haven't spent 1 penny just yet. So I didn't mean I haven't spent anything. It hasn't rounded up to a penny yet. So
I think the first million a month are free anyway.
Oh, awesome. Oh, there we go. Cool. So I'm always going to be in the free tier then. So,
cool. There was one other question from David Kent there about, does it support region DR replication? If you just want to go for that one,
yes.
Then and then we'll close it off and have a break.
Awesome. Yeah. Cheers, Phil. And, these are great questions. Thanks. And it just shows, I didn't send you all to sleep. So with cross-region replication, so the short answer to that is yes. Of course, we've got massive customers today doing SAP HANA. And so, in fact, some of the biggest SAP environments on the planet are running on this stuff today. And I can't name who or what or anything. Just know that you can have full confidence that this is used in production services of massive scale, as well as the much smaller scale as well. And typically between regions today, customers are using things like either XCP or Cloud Sync and stuff. The real question that you're asking there is it going to gain a native replication capability? Of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. You are ask me that question next week, because then you'll be able to see it. So basically, I'm an NDA presenter. I can't really tell you too much about it because it's under NDA. There is a private preview available, and I can give you more information under that. Or if you're under NDA with your CSAs, your local CSAs, I would say speak to your local CSA, and I can tell you much more about it, or they can tell you much more about it. But a short answer to that is, in just a few weeks' time, it's going to get a lot easier. There'll be something native that does it all for you. I don't think I'm giving anything away there. So.